Vaishnavi Namo Namah. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nevasesha Sonavara Bhasha Tirishtar. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasai Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So to start off, I would like to ask all of you, what is the goal of life? Sir. Any other answers?
Hot rods.
Hot rods. It's okay, we'll still give you food at the end if you answer wrong. Okay, so keep that in mind. Even if you didn't answer, keep the answer within your mind throughout this talk. So first off, there are numerous living entities. So what is the likelihood that you even attained a human life? Could someone pull out a calculator for me? Any one of you? All of you? So in the Skanda Purana, it is described that there is 84 lakh species of life. That's 8,400,000 species. And of that is 400,000 that are human. So for this, if you could divide 4 by 84 to make it simple, what's
4 by 84, 84 divided by?
Yeah, 4 divided by 84.
21.
4 divided
by 84. 4 divided by 84.
No, 4 divided by 84.
0.0447.
Okay, so that is like 5% practically that you even could get a human birth. So now subtract that answer by 1.
Negative.
So that is a 95% chance that you would have taken an animal birth. So very small chance that you would even get a human birth. I don't think you'd even want to bet money on getting a human birth. So with that in mind, what is the difference between animals versus humans? This is something that people often ponder. People say, oh, well, you know, I wear clothes, or maybe I know how to do engineering. I have a built house that was made by machines. I drive a car, all these different things, which one could argue that is true. You don't see animals driving cars or anything like that yet. But what is the goal of all of these things? How are we spending this life? Ultimately, generally, there's 4 bodily propensities, which are eating, sleeping, mating, and finning. Animals do it, humans do it, and this is basically what our whole life is framed around. So the human form is special. It's described in the very first verse of the Vedanta Sutras. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the time to inquire about the absolute truth. The human form is unique because you can think on a deeper level. An animal isn't going around saying, my owner just called me this 5 days ago and I'm still depressed about it. They're not going around thinking all these different things. A human can sit there and contemplate deeper things. Why am I feeling this way? What caused me to act like this in my past? We're able to really look back and reflect. So the human form is special in that sense. So what life is all about, obligations that I don't think many of us really want to do. You're born here, you are told you got to go to work, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to go to school, and if you don't, then your parents get in trouble. You have to still face disease, old age, and ultimately death. You have to suffer despite all your endeavors not to. You try to set up all these plans to be happy, but somehow or another, life doesn't make that happen. Somehow, something ends up messing up. and your plans. So questions like this is ultimately what will lead you to deeper realizations and experiences within your life. Buddha, I used to, disclaimer, before I even came here or anything like that, years and years ago, I was a hardcore atheist. And slowly I experimented with spirituality. So along my way, I looked into Buddhism a lot. And Buddhism is often known for the Four Noble Truths. The first being dukkha, that this life is full of misery. And the second, samudaya, that there's a cause to this misery, which is ultimately due to our attachments. And these attachments are the temporary things, because when we attach to something, everything in this material world has a due date, whether it's a friendship or by death or some other reason. It's temporary. So eventually this should ultimately lead you to, if everything is temporary, then what is eternal? What is that one thing that stays constant? Why am I trying to pull on all these loose branches and all kinds of things? I have no so that brings you to, what is my purpose in this life? If everything's temporary and I can't make everything go the way I want it to, what is the purpose? What is my purpose? People will oftentimes spend their whole life trying to figure this out. I think it's this, and then later on they change it. Well, actually, I think it's this. So it's constantly changing. We try to figure out what this is. So in Vedic texts, it is described that the soul is a small spark of energy made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, meaning eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So essentially, you're suffering bewilderments and frustrations, ultimately coming from living your life like a fish out of water. You know, a fish being out of water, it cannot be happy because it needs water, it needs its natural habitat. Similarly, you're an eternal being full of knowledge and bliss, but you're remaining in a temporary world that inhibits your natural state of being. Naturally, these things aren't going to satisfy you because you're eternal and you have all of these things. You don't face full knowledge. Even if you're the smartest person, you don't know everything. And you're not always blissful. There's always something that happens that comes and knocks that away constantly. So you're not going to live in your natural state, and it's frustrating. So how does one come to understand those matters concerning the soul? That's the ultimate question. Many talk about it, but what is spirituality? Do any of you have a guess on like a good definition of spirituality?
The way I like to think about it is like, in all of existence, you have two things: matter and spirit. Material, that which has to do with matter, and spiritual, that which has to do with spirit. So spirituality would be some sort of a belief system, a practice that is based on that which is spirit.
I like that. Any other answers? Okay. So I simply put it as it means to act on the platform of the spirit, of the soul, which I like how you put it, because it's starting to differentiate between material and spiritual. So that leads you to ask, how does one act as a soul? You know, what is it that you do differently than anyone else? If you're doing spiritual practice, it has to be something different than anybody else. If you're taking intoxicants and, you know, thinking by doing illicit sex or bell drums or whatever it may be, you're doing these different things thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna just become enlightened from these things, but other people who aren't spiritual are doing those exact same things. What is it that you're doing different? What is the difference between what you do and what everyone else does? And do you know for certain what you're doing is right or your practice is right? Or is it something that you're just speculating and you're going along with the way? It's not always safe to do that. Maybe, maybe you're the one person out of millions and billions of people for all centuries in the past that have finally figured it out. Maybe you're just that lucky of a person. Generally not, though. So, with that being said, oftentimes we hear that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We think we're doing good, but if our intelligence isn't in its right sense, then we might actually be causing more harm to ourselves and to others unknowingly. So there are different processes that are inherently spiritual. People approach things such as, they think doing good deeds, or empirical philosophy, figuring it out on your own, testing different things out, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Religion, that's a common one. The yoga ladder, Ashtanga yoga, mysticism, things. So we could look at Ashtanga yoga real quick, because that's a pretty popular one we hear about. So in Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs include abstinence, observance, posture, breathing, withdrawal, concentration, meditation, and absorption. Generally, nowadays, when you hear of yoga, it only includes 2 of them, which is posture and breathing. So you don't get the full benefits. Not saying that it's not good for you, but you don't get the full inherent. But even then, to be able to properly perform the Ashtanga qualified, this usually takes centuries to actually perfect, sometimes thousands of years to actually perfect. So it is described that, for a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for those who are already elevated in yoga, the cessation of material activities is said to be the means. So it's different for wherever you're at on that level. However, in the Bhagavad Gita, one of our main texts that we go off of here, Krishna is telling Arjuna about the yoga practice. So in chapter 6, 11 through 14, Krishna says, to practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Sounds pretty difficult, right? It's a whole bunch of things. It has to be this way, this way. So many things to actually execute yoga right.
Where did they get the deer skin from?
I'm not qualified to speak on that. You had to find someone more qualified than me. But just think about trying to focus your eyes on the tip of your nose for hours on end. That in itself is hard enough. But something to be pointed out right here is that Krishna makes it a point that he is the ultimate goal of life. He is the ultimate goal. So I think it's safe to say if there's a creation, then there must be a creator. If there's order, then there must be a controller. If there's law, there must be a master. If there's a part, there must be a whole. If you have a father, and so does your dad, and you go all the way back in that line, then who is the original father? There has to be a starting point. Because life comes from life. It is not manufactured just by putting material things together. No doctor has been able to bring back a dead body from days of death back to life. We haven't Frankenstein that yet. And we probably never will, because the soul has already left the body. So if there is a supreme father, then there must be a sort of relationship with him. So that understanding of who God is and our relationship with him is a higher realization. This is a high realization. So again, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. Of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. That means there's so many people trying so many different ways to know God or to know the ultimate truth in life. And out of those who have even started that, which are very few actually know who God is. Very difficult. Very difficult. But it doesn't have to be. So anyways, Arjuna, replying to all these rules on how to properly execute yoga, he says, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and endurable to me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. I mean, how often do we have our minds agitate us daily? We're contemplating what happened years ago. We're contemplating what has yet to happen. There's so many stresses, so many anxieties, so many causes of depression. Or we're just thinking about all these things we need to do. There's always something going on in our mind. And it's so hard to bring it to a peaceful state. And this is Arjuna that's responding. This is God showed up in his family as his cousin. So how qualified is Arjuna? He got to be best friends with God, and God decided that he would be his own charioteer driver. So what qualification do we have in comparison? So ultimately, the end goal is bhakti yoga. Even the Ashtanga system is to lead you to ultimately bhakti yoga. This is called Sanatan Dharma. Not to be confused with the general term of Hinduism. Sanatan Dharma comes from two Sanskrit words. Sanatana, meaning eternal, and Dharma, meaning that nature which cannot be taken away. So fire, it's hot. You can't take that away from fire. And water, it's wet. And so forth. So for the soul, it's part and parcel of the Lord. And so being a soul, it has a loving relationship, right? There's a love exchange there. Even just between our friends or family, we're always trying to have a loving exchange between one another. And this is because ultimately this is coming from our relationship with God, with Krishna. So what exactly does that mean? Love is a verb. It's an action. It's not just a feeling like, oh, I love you, and now my feelings have gone away, and so I'm doing my own thing now. Love is showing up even when it's hard. Love is wanting to serve you and make you happy despite how it makes me feel. That is love. Love is giving without expecting anything in return. So this is our relationship with Krishna. We have a loving relationship out of service. This is bhakti yoga. So Krishna says in 1855 of the Gita, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So we see right here, it doesn't have to be so hard to know who God is. He says that many strive for perfection, but hardly anyone knows him in truth. But he's saying right here, if you just serve him out of devotion, out of love, that he makes himself known, that he can be known by that, and that is the only way that you'll know him. How would you get to know me? Would you just go around asking people that don't know me about me? Would you go around to some people who actually know and serve me and love me? Would you maybe come up to me and try to hang around me and do things for me and figure out what I like, what I do, what I think's fun, what my taste in music or food is? That'd probably be what you are likely to do. So it's the same with God. We approach him through service. And in 12:20 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, God, he says, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and will completely engage themselves with faith, make me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So generally in the material world, hardly anyone's thinking about God. And those that are thinking about God, it's thank you for giving me this. Thank you for giving me that. Please give me this. I'd be so grateful if you did this for me. However, when one changes it up and he's like, all right, God, all right, Krishna, you've done everything for me. Since I was a baby, you made sure there was someone to take care of me. You made sure I always had food. I always had shelter. I was always able to make it through the hard times. I had friends when I needed them. I had everything that I needed to get to where I'm at right now. Now, what is it I'm able to do to you? Who am I? You don't need anything. You own the whole world. You are perfect. What can I do for you? And it's this that is very dear to God. It's changing it up. It's just like a child. He has nothing. His parents take care of him, give him everything that he needs. Sometimes they might get a little bit of cash to go buy some things or whatever. But when that child decides, you know what, I'm going to take that money my father or my mother gave me and I'm going to buy them their favorite candy bar or whatever it may be, and they offer that, that is so dear to the parent. The parent could have bought it. It's their own money. It's not like the child is giving them something that they didn't have or could get. But it's so dear because the child is thinking, how can I do something loving for you? And in the same way, God loves this relationship because it's much deeper. It's much deeper. So bhakti can be the goal and the means. It can be started at any point. You don't have to be a certain qualification. You could start from any point in your life. There isn't any qualification. And this is often described as, you have like the yoga ladder as I described, or other different processes that aren't necessarily bhakti. It's like taking stairs up a 40-story building. You know, you're still going to get there, but it's going to take some time. But bhakti yoga, the art of loving devotional service, which could be started at any point in time, no qualifications, is like taking the elevator up. You just go straight up. You don't have to sit there, hard endeavor, hard austerity, any of this. You can just go straight up. So, just for this reason, Krishna comes down or is representative time and again to teach us these things. In the Vedic text, it's described that he takes so many births age after age, but it's not just secluded to India. He also has people like Lord Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He has different people coming around to bestow bhakti or knowledge of God and how to serve him. So Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. One may ask, why do I need to approach someone? Can't I just get the book and just do it myself? Or can't I just figure it out on my own? Well, in the condition situation that we're in, there are four defects. And this is One, we must commit mistakes. How many times have we committed mistakes and we continue to make mistakes? This is common. Two, he must be illusion. How many times have we believed in something that actually turned out not to be true? Maybe someone told us something, or maybe we just assumed something that actually had no truth to it, or minimal truth. Three, he must possess the tendency to cheat others. So oftentimes people are trying to cheat other people. Sometimes we cheat ourselves. Sometimes we even do this unintentionally. And four, all his senses must be imperfect. So you can only hear up to a certain distance. You can only see up to a certain distance. You can only smell up to a certain distance or certain variety of smells. You can only taste a certain amount of things, so forth and so forth. So a proper teacher, he is gyananas tatva darshana. They have seen the truth. What does this mean? It means that they follow in a disciplic succession, not changing or adding anything. They follow what is known as Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And it's been like this from time immemorial. So Guru is a spiritual teacher that they formally accept, that has done this path for many years, and they are very dedicated and know it. And they have a guru, and their guru has a guru. And this is going all the way back up, back to God, essentially. Sadhus, which are devotees or saintly people. So the saintly people, they all are in agreement because they have a guru and they all practice the same thing. And they also all rely on Shastra, which is scripture. So scripture, saintly people, and a spiritual master. These are our three three checkpoints. With these things, we know we're in check. Okay, if it's in line with these three things, then we know it's good. But if something's out of line, then that must mean something's up. So it's not that we manufacture anything. It's being brought down again and again. So just to learn about anything, we had to approach someone who knows what it is we're trying to learn. Maybe you're trying to learn how to become a doctor, or you're trying to learn how to play a certain instrument. You have to approach someone that knows about that could teach you, especially a doctor, and let alone spiritual science, which hardly anyone in the world could really understand in its proper perspective. So you had to attain bhakti from receiving it from someone who already is a bhakti yogi, who is a bhakti. They serve God out of love and devotion. They try to devote everything to God. So different places approach things differently based on time, place, and circumstances. We must understand this. Don't get caught up in the details. In the Bible, especially in the New Testament, we'll focus on that part more. You had the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, they knew all the laws of Moses, and they judged people on it. So many laws that it was hard for many people to actually know. But they thought themselves really loved and chosen by God, and that they're the only ones doing it right. And everyone else, if they're not following, they're going to go to hell. All these different things, which it's missing the point. So what is the main point? What is the point? There's all these rules, but all these rules and regulations are ultimately to come to the point I'm about to bring up. They're to support that. It's not that these things are exactly you got to follow all these or else you don't get it. So going on with the whole Bible reference, once Jesus was asked, "Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments." It's So we can see that even within Christianity, Jesus was teaching Bhakti Yoga. He was teaching that to know God and the actual position in the soul is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. They're a part and parcel of God, struggling just like you. So all these authoritative personalities and practices have three essential core things. It's know God, love God, and serve God. It doesn't matter. We're not saying you have to convert to this practice or that practice. That's not necessary. The ultimate thing is that you need to be in such a position that you can know these three things. A Christian, a Muslim, a Jewish person, other people, if they ultimately come to knowing how to love and serve God, then they're perfecting their lives. If they're getting caught up in all the rules and regulations, oh, you got to do this, got to do that. Not saying that you're not supposed to follow them, but if you're getting caught up in focusing on these and other people's differences, oh, well, this religion says this, and that religion says that, and this religion says that, and this has to be the only right religion. They're all wrong. You're missing the point of what the whole faith and the whole practice is trying to teach you. So, what is the process of bhakti? Okay, I've been talking about it a bit. So, what is it? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, another one of our texts, there are described to be 9 different processes of bhakti. These include Shravanam, hearing, Kirtanam, chanting, Vishnu Smaranam, remembering, Padasevanam, serving the Lord's lotus feet, Archanam, deity worship, Vandanam, praying, Dasyam, executing orders, Sakyam, serving as a friend, and Atma Nivedanam, complete surrender. So if one could even just perfect one of these processes, they'll succeed in life. 9 simple processes. You got ears. I'm pretty sure all of you can hear me properly. I'm not seeing anybody having to do sign language or anything. So you can hear and perfect your life. You have a voice. If you could chant or glorify God, you can perfect your life. If you can remember, you could perfect your life. All these things, if you do them as an act of devotion, you could perfect your life. Let alone if you try to do almost, if not all of these 9 processes. So in previous yugas, which are different ages, there were different processes described in the Vedic literatures. So in Satya Yuga, which is millions and millions of years ago, people lived to be 100,000 years old. Hard to believe, but people lived to be 100,000 years old at this point in time. And the process back then was to do meditation. But it took them like 60,000 years to even perfect their meditation. So in Kali Yuga, where we only lived like 100 years, this is not practical. It would take you many lifetimes. In the following Yuga, Treta Yuga, the process was opulent sacrifices. So, they'd make a fire, they'd offer ghee, they'd offer jewels, they'd offer all kinds of things like this, grains, to the people performing the yajna, the sacrifice. They'd offer hundreds of thousands of cows to them, so many things. But who's really that opulent anymore? And these come with specific mantras that had to be chanted a specific way. Otherwise, the whole sacrifice is wrong. How many of us can actually properly pronounce and chant these mantras and remember them all? And then more recently, Dwapara Yuga, people lived to be 1,000 years old. And in this process, in that age, it was deity worship, but very opulent, very opulent. Again, you're offering gold, rubies, diamonds, jewels. You're doing very specific cleanliness standards. You're offering very elaborate food, so many things. This isn't really substantial. But in Kali Yuga, two processes are emphasized from the 9 processes I mentioned. That is Shravanam and Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. So we only live about 100 years on general. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less. We're not that smart. Our memory is not that long generally, and it's getting shorter. So the process is hearing and chanting. In the Brihan Naradiya Purana, there's this verse. That in this age of core hypocrisy, Kali Yuga, there's no other means of deliverance besides the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. There's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. So it's repeated that there's no other way 3 times. Why is that? Well, it's for emphasis for one. It's to tell you that this is very important to remember. Oftentimes in Vedic literature, and they will read things 3 times to let you know this is something to remember. But one is that through Jnana Yoga or mental speculation, you will not know God. You will not know how to love God. Through karma yoga, trying to do like the right things, if I live my life very piously, and I do all these outward things, then I'm gonna know God. No, you're not going to know God. And then mystic yoga, you do all these things, you attain all these mystic powers. You could shrink real small, real tall. You can read people's minds, all these different things. You're not going to know God by this process. In this age of Kali, it's just the chanting of the names of God. So, meditation. Okay, we said meditation isn't very suitable. I mean, generally when we hear meditation, we think of what we could call like shunya meditation or void meditation, we just try to focus on nothing, maybe focus on your breath, just let everything go away and all that. But it's really hard. And ultimately, the most you get is peace out of it. You don't get to really realize who you are or anything on a deeper level, because meditation is actually meant, as mentioned earlier, to be focused on God himself. But for this age, we do what's known as mantra meditation. So if you were here earlier for this singing and all that, this was a form of mantra meditation. It could be musical or it could be silently done to oneself. Mantra comes from 2 Sanskrit words, man meaning the mind and tra meaning the release. So mantra is a release of the mind. And this mantra that we were chanting is known as the Maha Mantra. Maha means great. So the Maha Mantra means the greatest release of the mind. So it is composed of 3 names. Hare, referring to God's internal energy. Krishna, that which means all attractive, because God's all attractive. And Rama, meaning the reservoir of all pleasure, because ultimately all our pleasure is coming from God. Even in the material world, everything is coming from God. So even if we're getting our pleasure in mundane things, it's still ultimately coming from God. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is described that pure love for Krishna, or God, is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens. So by chanting these names, which are described to be non-different than God himself, even in the Bible and Exodus, it's described that God is his name. God is not different than his name, fame, form, all these different things. So when one chants the names of God, he is directly associating with God. And at first, one might not quite understand this because it's a little esoteric. I can't lie. You know, if I say water, water, it doesn't fulfill my thirst. Not in this world, at least. I had to actually drink water. But with God, if you chant one of his names, then you have direct association because the name is spiritual. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually, is mentioned that in the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. And this is not other than our Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here in the center, in the gold. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an incarnation of God that had recently appeared. And there's so many references in Vedic scriptures, and Vedic scriptures they've always existed, but they were just written down 5,000 years ago by Veda Vyasadeva. So there are in several of the Vedic scriptures he wrote down 5,000 years ago. It describes Lord Chaitanya, what he'll look like, where he'll appear, what he'll do in his life. And the reason he comes down. Lord Chaitanya came to bring the highest thing to the lowest. So if you look at how his hands are positioned, one is reaching up for the highest and he's bringing it down for the lowest. So he is giving the holy name and really pushing forward, chanting God's name. And he's God himself proclaiming this, that if you chant these names, you'll attain the highest perfection of life. You will attain love of God. You'll know who God is, and you'll have the purest love for God. Bhakti itself is rare and the greatest gem. Devotional service is the most precious possession of a person who honestly uses his mind, body, and words. God has everything, but he doesn't have your complete love, attention, and devotion. God's the owner of everything in the world. He owns the world. He owns all the food, all the beautiful things. He owns everything. You can't really offer him anything. The only thing that he doesn't have, which he's constantly trying to come get, is your love and attention and your devotion to him. So in the Narada Bhakti Sutra is mentioned in relation to this, that Satvasmin Prema Rupa, devotional service manifests as the most elevated, pure love for God. So what's the end goal of it all? What is the end goal of all spiritual practices or of all of life? And that is Prema. And how do we how do we distinguish what is love and what is lust? You know, even in the material world, we have a hard time distinguishing between love and lust. So what is the difference? And the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is described that the desire to satisfy one's own senses is called lust. So if you're expecting something for yourself out of whatever relationship, this is lust. While the desire to satisfy the senses of Krishna is called Prema, love of God, pure love of God. So there is no question of lust in the execution of pure devotional service, because in it, all material activities are renounced. So in devotional service, one learns how to turn every activity, everything they think, they speak, they do, as a devotional service to God. It's not just every now and then I put around some time to chant his names or do this little thing for him. It's becomes everything. And it's a gradual process. It's not like you're going to just be right here and be super elevated right away. It's a process. We're conditioned. We have a lot of things that have happened in this life and numerous previous lives that takes time. So what do we get? It's a big ask, you know, you're saying devote your whole life to God. You know, you quit what you're doing, whether it's mundane or whatever or bad, just give your life to God. So what do you get in return? Again, in the Narada Bhakti Sutra, it is stated that Shanti Rupat Paramananda Rupachcha. Furthermore, bhakti is the embodiment of peace and supreme ecstasy. So in this material world, we're constantly trying to find happiness. We're trying to find it in so many different things: intoxication, illicit connections with the opposite gender or the same gender, movies, so many different things. We're trying to find out where to find this happiness, but nothing quite satisfies us because we're busy trying to satisfy the senses of this body, and this body is not us ultimately. So it is never fully satisfied. We're polishing the cage, but we're neglecting feeding the bird inside the cage. So we're dying in the inside in one sense, and we're trying to make the body get everything we think it needs. It needs to have all this type of food. It needs to have this. It needs to have that. It never gives full satisfaction, and we keep striving, but it never gives us that full satisfaction. We're tasting after a drop of water, being dehydrated in the middle of the desert, or after just a drop of happiness. So with this being said, I'd like to open this up for any discussions or questions. They're about to bring out the food here pretty soon. Anybody? Omar?
Yeah, something that is like when there's like a person that you're engaging with and you're like expressing love to them, you can see like an immediate reaction. It feels like it's almost easier. It feels somehow like easier to have like a loving relationship with like a person that's in a body than it does with like God, who's although personal and like everywhere and it's always present. Like sometimes it feels thing because like sometimes you want to point to someone and have like an immediate response. So it's like, how do you overcome that desire to like have like that immediate like reciprocal response? It's like I give you food or something, or I do something nice for you or something, and I can see something, but then it's like, all right, I make this food for God, but then like I can't see God smile or be like, oh, thank you, this is great.
Barely touched it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, this is a good question. This takes time. We're used to trying to be real and personal with God. We didn't want to know God, and so we're here in the material world where things kind of cloak over that knowingness and that personal relationship with God. So like I was describing to you earlier when I was reading The Journey of Self-Discovery, one person asked Prabhupada, or one of our main spiritual teachers, they asked him, can you see God? Where is God? And his response is that you can see God too, but what is your qualification? Let's say there's a broken down vehicle, right? Now you're looking at it and you're seeing this broken down vehicle, and yeah, I'll take one. Thank you. You're seeing this broken down vehicle, and that's all you can see. You don't really know, but someone who is a mechanic can actually see it in a different perspective and fix the vehicle. So they have a certain qualification. Similarly, we had to have a specific qualification to see God, because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Naham prakasha sarvasya yoga maya samma vritaha murho yam navajanati lokamamajam avyayam. I'm never manifested, false, and intelligent. For them, I'm covered by my eternal potency, and therefore they do not know that I'm unborn and infallible. So Krishna has the ability to cover you over or take away that cover. And in the process of Bhakti Yoga, that cover starts becoming thinner and thinner and thinner. And we start to develop a more personal relationship. But because we're not able to get there instantaneously, God does come in the form which is known as a deity. God doesn't have to, but out of his mercy, he can come within anything that you would see as material. So even though we see the deity and it's made out of marble or wood or brass, Krishna could put his full potency in there. That way you can develop a more personal relationship with him. You get to offer him food directly. You get to dress him. You get to talk with him face to face. It's to help us get off of this impersonal platform That way we can have more personal relationship. And with time, you will see and get more of a response. And you'll understand when he's talking to you. And yeah, it's original.
I just want to comment on that a little bit too. Is like another way, that is a way that we can have an exchange is with other people. Because that's why, like when you were referencing the Bible earlier, I feel like that's why, and it's even written in the Old Testament too, but love your neighbor as yourself. That's why that's second. And like, my guru, most of you probably don't know him, he's pretty small times, but he always is on this kick telling people that they're all God's favorite. And I think part of the process of bhakti is seeing that in each and every person, whether they're acting like it or not, because I mean, none of us do, really. We might see someone like, oh, they're not, and think that, I'm not that good of an example either, but really, like from God's perspective, none of us are, that different. And focusing on that and having, people misuse this saying a lot, but Seva Nak, Seva Narayana. Service to man is service to God. When that's done in the mood of, I see in here Paramatma, you were real ornery, you did all these things to me, Omar, but I can't stay mad at you because you're God's favorite, and nothing to do with you, but like, I could not do that to Krishna. And then once you like meditate on that and focus on that and you have these exchanges with people, I think that is the best way, for me anyway. You see
other
the
people are
reaction.
like a tangible manifestation.
Yeah. And sometimes like God can use people and you can offer service to them and they're not conscious at all of what's going on, but you can still feel that exchange from Krishna.
Like God acts through them.
Yeah, in a way. And it can even be through their own folly or an artist. I mean, that's all of us. None of us are excluded from that. We've all had our not proud moments where God could have been using us. We didn't even realize it. That's how like Dharma works, is you may be doing something out of material consciousness, but Krishna is going to align that with someone else's karma and someone else's desire and create all these situations that he's always doing. And you're going to be completely ignorant to it. But to someone that you may not even realize is a devotee, they're going to get an answer that they needed, that exchange, that reaction that you were talking about. They're going to get out of that reaction, and you're going to be completely oblivious. But the more you engage in this process of bhakti, the more you're going to feel these things and notice them. And sometimes, most of the time, not even understand what's going on, but just feel that feeling of acknowledge it.
No, I think that's an important point, especially learning service to the devotees, because it's explained that service to devotees is almost more pleasurable to God. Now, like, why is this? I have this one example, which forgive me because I can't think of a better example at this point in time, but let's say that you're a male and you're trying to date and eventually marry a single mom, right? Now there's 3 different approaches that you could go about this. So you could treat the child like not good, like crap, and is the mother. Like, okay, you know what? There is no. You can neglect the child and focus on the mom, which, mom's kind of like, all right, at least you're not hurting my child or anything, huh? Yeah, you're not mistreating my child, so how could I really be mad at you? But if you sit there and you make a personal, loving relationship with her child as well, it's a lot more pleasing to the mother. So similarly, approach and God's devotees and please God, so we could mistreat his people who, as I had mentioned earlier, are very, very dear to him. And ultimately, he'll be like, you know, I love you, but you're going to act like that to people that are very, very dear to me. Maybe not right now. Come back when you're forgiven by them. Or you could neglect them and focus on him, which, you know, that's great. Like, I'm glad you're focused on me, but also you should love your brothers and sisters as well. And then, if you have a loving relationship with them who are very dear to him and you're pleasing them, he's seeing that pleasure within them that you're creating, so you're also pleasing him. So in this way, if you just do a little bit of service to a devotee or a saintly person, God sees that you're doing something for someone who's very dear to him, very special to him. So this is another way, as you said, that one could kind of approach God, because it's hard. We don't see him, or most of us are not at the level to see him or really exchange word for word interactions with him at this point.
How would you say God reciprocates?
God reciprocates. Let me think of this verse. Yeah, no. Yeah, you don't. No, I'm not even gonna try. I don't remember right now. Anyways, Krishna says that as all surrender unto me, I will reward them accordingly. All follow my paths in all respects, son of Pratha. So, to the extent that you interact with God and that you surrender yourself to God, is the extent that He'll reveal and interact with you. So He can make those signs in so many ways. If you want to be an atheist, God has the power to make you the greatest atheist. He'll give you all the knowledge that, you know, you think you're right. Okay, I got all the things here. So obviously there mustn't be a God. But if you sincerely want to know him, he'll give you all the facilities to know him. I was a hardcore atheist growing up. I argued with most of my friends, like, why do you believe in God? You don't even know what he looks like. You can't explain to me what he looks like, what he does. Like, you can't really explain to me besides that there's an angry person that wants to send me to hell or heaven. And in time, I got more sincere and wanted to question that. And he started reciprocating. So maybe it's that he gives you certain signs in your day-to-day life, which you gotta kind of differentiate to notice those kinds of signs because they could be subtle. Maybe it's him sending someone to you. Maybe it's him answering a prayer you asked about. Maybe you wanted to know him on a deeper level and you received a book from someone or you heard something from someone that gave you a deeper insight on that. And he is constantly trying to reciprocate with you, but oftentimes we don't hear all his reciprocations. We may take it as just what do you call that? Just a coincidence, or we may take that as, oh, I'm tripping. That's not real. There's so many things that we block ourselves with, but he constantly is trying to communicate. God, once you get to know him, he's a yapper. He does not stay quiet. He's constantly trying to talk to you. Yes, I don't know.
It's like that movie, Bruce Almighty.
Yes.
Like, why don't you give me a sign? And they're literally everywhere. That's why I think anytime we ask God something like that, or we even think about it, for me, I try to catch myself and instead that's like, I know I don't realize it or see it at all right now, but you have to be like working and showing me things. So like, instead of asking you to show me something else or to, make a sign, like just open my eyes more so I can see all of the ways that you're already present in my life, that you're already working, like guiding me through your dharma and all of the blessings that I have that I'm ungrateful for. And then that happens. Like when I went back to Indiana for a while and away from here, I was like so depressed sometimes, and I had to go to this job in the freezer that was 20 degrees below zero at like 3 in the morning on the weekends.
Terrible.
Yeah, and I'd feel like and every time, not every time, but like as often as I could muster up the strength to do it, whenever I felt myself getting bummed out by it, I would just, as one of my philosophy professors, so I consider like one of my spiritual gurus in life, who told us there's 3 perfect prayers: help, thanks. So if I couldn't like come up with some flowery thing or just whatever, anytime I caught myself feeling with that, I would just look up, I'd say, thanks. Like, lots of people would love to have a job where they make $34 an hour and have to get up and work in a freezer, and because it's a lot better than most people really have, as horrible as it sounds. And it would make me just appreciate things a lot more. I go from one day at work, because I have PTSD for those who don't know, and so I'm usually like not here on Sundays and stuff, or when there's large groups of people. So I have a bad day at work where I was not grateful, and I'd be like thinking that coworkers were like plotting like some accident to like drop a giant crate or something and kill me, and then like the next day I would be grateful, and like that dude seemed like my best friend, and I just see ways that they're just helping me out and stuff, and I didn't even realize it. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, just yesterday you thought that dude was trying to kill you. And gratitude is, it's a cliche or whatever, but they're there for a reason.
So, thank you.
Do you think it's bad to like say prayers if you don't actually mean it? Like if I say thank you, but I'm not actually feeling grateful, am I sacrificing authenticity? Like for the sake of just saying thank you, like is it good to do that?
Sometimes you gotta fake it till you make it. We're not always gonna be sincere in everything, but our act of training ourselves to be sincere can reach us to a sincere platform. So if you just start off, even if you're not sincere, or trying to do something, I might not really be in that mood yet, but I know that if I keep going, eventually that will be kind of like hardwired into my head that this is what I do, and that mood eventually awakens. But you have to start somewhere. It's not going to be just like instantaneous, like, oh, all of a sudden I'm perfected. All right. Anyways, I think we'll end here. But before I end off, I wanted to just make a disclaimer that this isn't exactly a religion in a sense of sectarianism, like most people think of. You're Christian, I'm Hindu, you're Muslim. All this is fully applicable to anyone and everyone, because this has to do with the soul. This is actually a science in the biggest sense. Vedic texts are a science. And Prabhupada oftentimes wanted us to stress that, because with science, if you're able to take A plus B and you should be able to give it to someone else, and they should be able to replicate it and get the same exact results if they apply the process correctly. So similarly, this bhakti process, if one is to take it up sincerely, then they should get a result. They should start seeing things. They should start actually getting a visual thing. It's not a faith-based thing of, I think this is how it is, and eventually, maybe by the time I die, I'll figure it out. No, you should get results within this lifetime of your practice. You should have something tangible. And this process is so simple in the beginning, especially because our main focus is just chanting the names of God, because this will ultimately, through constant chanting, one will eventually come to being able to be on a more proper or whatever stage by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is a prayer like a child begging its mother, like, I am in distress, please come and save me. This is kind of what this prayer is calling out for. It's, I'm in distress, I'm in this material position that's caused me so many anxieties and things. And I know that ultimately I have a relationship with you. So please teach me that relationship and help me to serve you. It's a constant prayer that you could chant at any time, at any place while doing anything. You could be even sweeping, mopping, whatever it may be. You could be chanting God's names. And since they're not different than him, you could apply this as association. So if I stick a hot rod into a fire, what happens to that rod? It becomes red hot. So when I touch on something, now it has the same quality as fire. It burns things. So similarly, if we decide we want to hang out with bad association, we'll gain bad qualities. But if we associate with good personalities, we gain good qualities. And if you're associating with the supreme good, pure, what's that to say about you? In time, you'll start to all these beautiful qualities naturally start to manifest. You don't have to endeavor very hard. You don't have to, sit there for hours and hours just focusing on the tip of your nose and trying to figure everything out. All you have to do is chant the names of the Lord. Anyways, thank you all for coming out. I appreciate all of you for listening. I'm sorry if I made any offenses or upset any of you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Which one? Oh.